Hello there, Star Wars fans, and welcome back to a RebelScum.com video. And today I am joined by the ever so lovely and talented Mr. Simon J. Williamson, the Blue Elephant himself.
Good
or
evening.
Is it
Good afternoon.
blue something else?
He's a blue ortolan, is his species. But he looks so like an elephant that people call him the blue elephant.
And I heard that his shade of blue was named a very peculiar, interesting name as well.
There's a shade of blue called cerulean, and one of Max Rebo's alternative names. So I think that they say his real name is Max Rebo, but his stage name is Cerulean Fantel, or it's the other way round. But cerulean is a blue colour, and Fantel is actually, when you think about it, a mix-up of the word elephant. Fantel, elephant. So blue elephant.
They're always so clever over at Lucasfilm when they're coming up with these creature names and creature labels, and
they have fun with that, as did Jim Henson on of the Muppets. They messed around with names. So there was in the Muppets there was a character called Leave 'Em Alone, and one of the costume makers, designers, was called Lee Malone. So there's an internal gag here. And in Return of the Jedi, there's another character called Reese, who has 3 eyes. So Reese, 3 eyes, sounds similar. And Hermie Oddle is, I think he's like a hemorrhoid. So yeah, fun to be had with names of creatures.
it certainly seems like it. So, Simon, tell us, how did you get involved with Star Wars? What is the Max Rebo, what is the Simon J. Williamson Star Wars origin story?
Okay, well, immediately before Return of the Jedi, I did a film that was groundbreaking because the cast was entirely composed of puppets or puppeteers operating puppets, and that was called The Dark Crystal, made by Jim Henson. Jim Henson co-directed it with Frank Oz, so it's basically directed by Kermit, Jim Henson, and Miss Piggy, Frank Oz. But
it's funny to think about.
It is, yeah.
Because I'm just picturing Kermit the Frog now sitting in the director's stool, and Miss Piggy sitting next to him.
Yes, Piggy, should we go for a close-up here?
Of course a close-up. Of course a close-up. I deserve nothing less.
So, yeah.
Oh, so
but
funny.
the thing about the Dark Crystal was, even though it's made by the people behind the Muppets, it was a very realistic world, and all emanating from the mind and the illustrations of a guy called Brian Froud, who does books on fairies and goblins, and then created this world called Thra. And you can see the film now still, but more recently Netflix did a 10-part series. So Dark Crystal was my entree into playing creatures, and about 6 months after we finished shooting Dark Crystal, they were casting and preparing Return of the Jedi. So that was a straight job offer. I didn't need to audition or anything, and it was filmed at the same studio, Return of the Jedi and Dark Crystal, in the same studio, Elstree Studios, north of London. So in turn, my work on Dark Crystal came from an advert in a weekly newspaper called The Stage, and it was very intriguing and not at all clear what the advert was about. And it was calling for equity, which is the actors' union in the UK. Actors, dancers, mimes, circus performers, aerialists, to play large-scale creatures in a fantasy world or something. And then it just gave the address to where to write to. And I can't remember whether it said anywhere in the advertisement it was the Henson organization. There was certainly a big logo, HO, exclamation mark, which stands for the Henson organization. It didn't mention the Muppets or the Henson people or anything like that. So the first I kind of knew that it was the Henson people was at the first audition, which was a massive group audition. And as I stepped into the big hall in my sort of workout gear, I recognised the person who was conducting the audition, a Swiss mime artist called Jean-Pierre Amiel, and I'd done a workshop with him about 6 months before in another city. So that was a good start, and I knew his work and I knew the style of work he liked. And it just, as auditions go, you get through the first one and then there's a recall and then there's a further recall. And we got down to a group of 10 people, performers, who would be playing these characters in the movie. And we I think we all worked together for a very short while, and then like 2 weeks. And then we had a decision process where of that 10 people, 4 would start immediately, and the other 6 would join 6 months later. So, and I wasn't in the initial group of 4 to begin with. I was actually number 5 choice. But after about something like a week only, the person who was number 4 choice and in that initial group, he damaged his back. And so they gave me a call and said, Toby Philpott is out. You're the next one on the list. Are you available? And so I became one of that initial group of 4, which was just great. And Toby Philpott is also the guy who is let me get this right, the right hand of Jabba the Hutt. So we kind of worked together on both films.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
So having worked on Dark Crystal, I take it that led you into Return of the Jedi. So did you audition for Return of the Jedi? I
didn't need to audition because it was similar kind of work. So rather flatteringly, I was asked to be in. So I'm asked to be in a Star Wars, and of course, am I going to say no? No, right. It's brilliant. So I got the job, and I was classified as a mime artist. No, I was classified as a puppeteer, and there was another group of people called mime artists. Although, as it happens, most of the characters I ended up playing are more in the area of mime than puppeteering. So Max Rebo, this lovely creature you all know here, he's kind of more like a suit character rather than a puppet. But there's some kind of, there's a kind of crossover between the two, between a suit performer and a puppet here. The sort of puppeteering I tended to do was I did, for example, the eye blinks on Nine Numb in the Millennium Falcon with Lando Calrissian and Nine Numb, and the main puppeteer there was Mike Quinn, who also, as it happened, worked on Dark Crystal. So there was a lot of cross-fertilization of the cast and performers from the 2 movies, and they both filmed in the same place, Elstree Studios.
Now, when you started with Star Wars, when they brought you on for Return of the Jedi to portray some of these creatures, which character were you given first? Did they just put you in a Gamguard suit first, or did they put you as Max Rebo first?
No, it was the first sequence to be filmed was the Jabba the Hutt sequences and Jabba's palace. So the first creature I was given in Jabba the Hutt's palace was actually a character called 6-6.
Oh, okay.
6-6. So
not familiar with that character.
Yeah, well, I have a photograph of him. He's quite rare because he didn't survive into the film. He ended up on the cutting room floor, unless he's somewhere in the background in a very dark corner of the set.
Oh,
but
okay.
I certainly we turned over footage on at least 3 or 4 takes where I was playing 6-6. But I think it was the case. I think I got the order correct. It was George Lucas liked the character, but the director, Richard Marquand, didn't. So he kept on de-emphasizing the character in shot or cutting away from him, panning away from him, and George kept on saying, where's that slug-like creature? So obviously there's a bit of kind of indecision there or disagreement. And then the next day, they said, we have this other character you could play. And they took me up the stairs into the creature room at the studios, and there before me was this wonderful bright blue character with a long nose and sort of little ears, a bit like an elephant's ears. And and that was Max Rebo. I go, do you want to play Max Rebo? And of course I did. So he's bright blue in the middle of a dark set, which also has lots of smoke in it. So I thought he's really going to stand out, and he looks fun. he was actually very uncomfortable to play, but as a character, he has great impact. So that's how I went from playing 6/6 to the iconic blue elephantine creature, Max Rebo.
But you also played some other characters in Return of the
Yes.
Jedi,
Yes.
to my understanding. Not just Max Rebo and Jabba's court, but you also played some of the Gam Guards as well.
I played several Gam Guards, because there are several sequences of Gamorrean Guards. And I also, in particular, I played the one who gets eaten in the Rancor pit by the monster there. So a stuntman does the fall,
Okay.
and then I pick up the shot from being on the floor in the dungeon area, facing off against Luke Skywalker, and then there's a rumble off to my left or my right, and there's this big portcullis opening out of which is going to come Rancor the pit monster. So I have to react to this creature that at that stage wasn't there, wasn't designed. So he's this big and he's that frightening, react to that. So that's one Gam Guard I played. But also in that sequence, I play one of the Gamorrean Guards upstairs looking down at myself as the other Gam Guard in the bottom of the dungeon, because it's just two different shots cut together. So I'm kind of two characters in one sequence.
That's
Probably a
pretty
third, because in the same sequence there'll be a shot of Max Rebo. So you, as in filming, you make up a sequence with lots of different shots, sometimes shot on a different day. So the Gamorrean Guards were quite fun, and lots of sequences there, including, leading Chewbacca down into the dungeons below the stage. That was quite fun. And, walking through the set with my arm on, my hand on Luke's Han Solo's shoulder when he's just been defrozen from the carbonite up in front of Jabba the Hutt. And then after we finished that sequence, we went on to the Mon Calamari sequences with the kind of the rebels. And there's a scene with Mon Mothma and General Medine discussing tactics, and I'm one of the Mon Calamaris in the background there. And then much later, we did some little cutaway shots of Nien Nunb and Lando in the Millennium Falcon, and the main puppeteer of Nien Nunb is the wonderful Mike Quinn, and I was assistant puppeteer doing the eye blinks, so off camera, just controlling the points at which Nien Nunb blinks. And then the same kind of period we did another character who we called Ten Nunb, and I don't think Ten Nunb is even in the deleted scenes on the Blu-ray. But there was a character called Ernie Akbar, who's now called Ika Sulko, that is on the deleted scenes, and he was another calamari like Admiral Akbar. And Tim Rose did the main bit of puppeteering on that, and I was a flipper or a hand at the side. So on the Blu-ray edition, if you have it, and they look for the deleted scenes, and there'll be these sequences. And there's a bit where there's a voice off camera saying, "Oh, that's good, Simon, do that with the hand again," or something like that. And that voice off is George Lucas himself, because this was a second unit shot. Richard Marquand, the main director, would be on the main unit, and George is, in a little separate studio doing these quite simple little setups. They're basically a static shot. But because the Millennium Falcon rocks from side to side, it's very low tech. What happens is they have like two planks on either side of the Millennium Falcon model, and crew members are pushing up and down like a seesaw to give you that movement. So it's always interesting when so much these days in films is all about very sophisticated special effects, often done afterwards, and manipulation of the image, that here we are using a very simple practical effect. And I like that kind of stuff. And I think that kind of takes me up to the end of my involvement of the creatures in Return of the Jedi. But that was the sequence of how we went through the movie.
What would you say was one of your favorite memories? Not your most favorite memory. I'm not going to ask you to pick make you think that hard.
Yes, it's
but
difficult.
What would you say is one of your more favorite memories from working on Star Wars and Return of the Jedi?
Yeah, it's the sequence all around the Gamorrean guard who gets eaten by the Rancor.
Really?
Yeah. It's because the way you have to play a Gamorrean guard is you have to be very big inside the costume to make a large costume's movement read on screen. If you're just yourself moving with the normal way you move, it doesn't really show through a large costume. So, for example, a character breathing, if you want to show the character breathing, it's no good for me in the suit just to breathe in a normal way. I have to exaggerate, so you kind of do all that stuff and push your chest out in order to make it look like shallow breathing. You have to do deep movement underneath the costume. So, yeah, that was really great fun. And the Gamorrean guard in the pit, in addition, this is kind of working from that idea that how you, the movement you do inside a big costume has to be extra large. There's a bit where I, as the Gamorrean guard, am fleeing up this kind of gully, fleeing from this massive monster that I don't know what it looked like at that time. I'm just reacting. And I started to laugh at the absurdity of it, because I was kind of off balance and I couldn't move, I couldn't get up. I could only turn round at that stage, but I didn't need to because he was going to be eaten any second. And it suddenly occurred to me how ridiculous it was as a grown man inside a giant green rubber pig-like creature. And I started to laugh. But there's no way the laugh would show because I was doing normal laughter.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's really funny.
It is.
Now, we also know that you played Audrey 2, or were one of the puppeteers who brought Audrey 2 to life in the feature film Little Shop of Horrors. Between Little Shop of Horrors, going all the way back to Dark Crystal, and everything in between, what would you say was your most challenging role as a puppeteer actor?
The most challenging was Ursol the Chanter, which was my mystic, or the mystics, or the Uru as they're called in the mythology of Dark Crystal, because the physical contortions we had to do in order to play the mystics was very, very demanding. We're basically walking along in a crouched position, so you're kind of knee level, with my arm out, stretched out like this. On the end of my arm is the mystic head. So you've got to keep that tension. Also, because as you can see, my arm is off to one side. So in order to make the mystic's head in the center, I'm doing this. I'm bringing it right towards, and I'm looking down, and I'm all crouched up like that, and my knees are crouched up. So you're performing this, and you're trying to walk along in a level fashion like this, when your instinct, as you're on your haunches, would be to kind of move up and down as you kind of, but that wasn't going to make the creature live. So we had to train ourselves to be able to tighten our muscles in this kind of crouched over position and do a smooth movement when inside your muscles are shaking almost. So that was very physically demanding. But the idea is that you look at a mystic and you think to yourself, well, it's not a puppet, it's not a cartoon, it's not a special effect. It's how's it done? So that's the wonderful challenge about something like the mystics in particular. You should look at it and think, well, I don't know how they're doing that. And it's because of this mystic head on the end of your arm. So that's true puppeteering, because it's, you're using your hand to be the mouth that speaks like that. I was going to think of something else about, it's on that subject. Because the head is so powerful, there are breaks in the shooting, when you can't get out of the mystic costume because you're strapped into it and it's bent over. So they gave us little stools about that high that we could just prop our buttocks on to take some of the pressure off. And there was a fiberglass tip from back of our head looking up ahead, which you could rest the head on you could kind of loop out. So you can take your arm out, and the mystic head isn't kind of falling on the floor. So in a rest position, we're doing that. And one of the dressers came round and to say, Simon, would you like a cup of tea or something? And I'm there hearing this tiny voice, and I'm saying, June, I can't hear you. And that's because she wasn't speaking to my head back here. She was speaking to the character's head. Yeah. So yeah. It works. The character works if you speak to the actual puppet head rather than where the puppet is.
Now, did the puppet want some tea?
No, I wanted some tea. The puppet,
he was fine.
Had no appetite whatsoever.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, that saves on food and drink.
It does
I guess.
save on food and drink. Yes,
that's very nice.
Yeah,
that's very nice. Simon, thank you so much once again for joining us today here on RebelScum.com, guys. Thank you for tuning in and hanging out with Mr. Simon J. Williamson, the one and only original Max Rebo, and the Gamguard that got eaten by the Rancor, which it's funny to say that in a way where that's super cool, but it is super cool because out of all of the Gamguards in Return of the Jedi, that's the one I would say that stands out the most.
Yeah.
For, obvious reasons.
He has more to do than other Gamorrean guards, really.
Certainly, yeah, he certainly does. And then, of course, Audrey, too, is Audrey, too. She's a classic from a fantastic film. And Dark Crystal is so good. Dark Crystal is an amazing experience. If you haven't watched Dark Crystal, do yourself a kindness, because like Simon said, there was a lot of puppeteer actors who came from Dark Crystal over to Return of the Jedi, and that was definitely one of the coolest things I think they did.
Yeah. Thank you, Rebel Scum.
Stay tuned for more. Like and subscribe. Follow us on social media and check the main website daily for all kinds of daily Star Wars toy-related content and more, because you never know, you might miss some awesome interviews and get to meet some wonderful Star Wars talent like Mr. Simon here. Check out CoolToyReview.com, our sister website for non-Star Wars toy-related news content. Check out Bay 12, our other YouTube channel, for more non-Star Wars related toy content and more. Stay tuned for more content from us. We'll see you guys later. We'll see you another time. May the Force be with all of you, you Rebel Scum.